Well, welcome to the premiere episode of Inside Edge. I'm Paul Zawaska, your host. A little bit about my background. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin way back in the 80s in soil science with a specialty in turf and grounds management. As a kid, I grew up being a fan of the Chicago Cubs here up where I live here in southern Wisconsin. And I kind of always dreamed about taking care of Wrigley Field as a kid. And so my desire was always to become a major league groundskeeper. So I took the path of going to school back at that time. And you know, in the 80s, there weren't a lot of turf students going into sports fields. It was all golf. So I was kind of a rarity at the time. So I joined the Orioles right out of school in 1985 and was with them for 15 and a half seasons after that. The first 6 seasons at Memorial Stadium, and the last whatever it was after that seasons at Oriole Park. So I was there for the design work and the building and the opening of Oriole Park. Left there in mid-season of 2000, and I'd had my fill of Major League Baseball and moved back to my hometown of Madison, Wisconsin, and started work with a company called Beacon Athletics, who sold equipment and materials to maintain ball fields. And I spent 21 years with that organization. You might have seen me on a lot of videos and or read a lot of my blogs on groundskeeping, possibly, maybe. So I created a lot of content back in those days educating groundskeepers on how to maintain ball fields. At the same time I was there, we started a testing program for our products that we developed, especially field maintenance tools, things like that, at a local Little League. And we used that facility for the bulk of the time that I was there, actually, to try our products out, refine our products, make them better, that kind of stuff. And while I was there, I also ended up getting involved in it. And that's where today's show is going to go. I'm going to tell my story and why does it matter. This show is about, this podcast is about and for people who have to maintain fields at the lower levels, whether it's park and rec, recreational fields, or if it's youth leagues that or baseball associations where people have to take care of their own fields. They don't have the professional knowledge. That's what we're here to do, is to give you that information. The professionals up at the upper levels, they have their podcasts, and they don't need another one in the mix there. And truthfully, I prefer to spread my knowledge to the lower levels. I actually find that much more satisfying than I do working with the upper levels. Not that I'm not saying that the upper levels are snobby or anything, but they don't need it. They're in the action already doing it. It's the people at the lower levels that are hungry for that information. So let's get back to the story. So I as I was saying, I was working at Beacon, and we were using this Little League complex, a 3-field complex, about 8 or 9 acres, to maintain these playing fields. And it all started out, actually, in 2001. My son was old enough to start playing there, and so he had gotten on a team, and the season hadn't started yet, but they had as a lot of leagues do, they'll have a spring cleanup of their ball fields and the park and whatnot. And so I signed up for that, and I went out there, and I walk into the place, and I'm looking around, and some of the stuff I was saying was, to me, not quite right. You got moms sitting on the infield dirt pulling weeds and things like that, and all kinds of stuff that wasn't quite making sense to me. And as I'm standing there kind of looking around, panning around, taking a hold of the situation, this guy comes up behind me and taps me on the shoulder behind my back, and I turn around and I looked at him, and he goes, "Are you Paul Zawaska?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Didn't you used to work for the Orioles as a groundskeeper?" And I go, "Yeah." And he said, "Boy, do we need your help here." And I go, "Yeah, I see that." And it turned out to be a gentleman who was on the board, who would eventually become president of the board, and he kind of tried to suck me in pretty much right there to get involved. But eventually, what it led to was they asked me to work with their long-range planning group, or a portion of their board members who were doing long-range planning. I said, okay, that's fine. I can go and help with that. So a couple weeks later, I went to their meeting. They met up at the fields. They were meeting at a picnic table, and I kind of walked up there. And as I'm walking up there, I'm hearing them talking about uniforms. And I came over there and sat down, and we started talking. I said, well, show me your long-range plan so far. And they go, oh, we don't have one. I said, well, how long have you guys been meeting? They go 2 years. And I said, 2 years and you don't have a long-range plan? And I just, at that point, I pretty much had an idea of what I was dealing with. So basically what I told them, I said, you know what, guys? I said, give me 2 weeks, and I'll put together a long-range plan for you guys. So 2 weeks goes by. I put together this 5-year long-range plan that dealt with all the issues that they were having at the fields there, things that I could see. And it involved both the playing fields and it involved the common areas as well. And I had on there, what we had to do or what needed to be done, the timing of when each thing should be done, because certain things had to be done in certain orders, so you weren't walking back over what you had already done and creating damage. And then also how we were going to fund it. And so I went back 2 weeks later and showed them the report, and they were blown away, like, holy cow, he's got the whole plan right here. And so they were pretty knocked out and excited about it. And so they said, well, let's take this to the board and see if we can get a vote on it. So we went to the board the next meeting, the monthly meeting, and I went and I presented it to them and everything. And the comment I got from some of the board members was, well, this is Little League. This isn't Major League Baseball. And I said, well, if you want to upgrade these facilities from what they are, they're kind of, it's kind of dilapidated here right now, guys. It could use some work. But anyway, so I had done what I could, and so I left the meeting, and then they voted on it after I left. And I got a call later that night from the board member who had tapped me earlier on, and he said, "Hey, Paulie, I got some good news and I got some bad news for you." And I go, "Oh, what's the good news?" He said, "The good news is they're going to raise the registration fees, which was one of the things I was pushing for, because they were charging way too little for the program. In order to be able to take care of their facility, they were not charging enough." And he goes, "Yeah, they're going to raise it $15 to pay for the increase in property taxes." And I'm like, "Oh, Jesus." I said, "What's the bad news?" He said, "They turned down your 5-year plan." So after we got through all that, I thought to myself, okay, these guys apparently don't get it. The funny thing is the board was made up with about half of the board was young people who had kids in the organization playing, and the other half were parents who didn't have a child anymore playing in that organization, but they enjoyed what the whole thing was, and so they stayed on the board. We had a good mix. The problem was some of the older people were the ones that were, well, that's the way we've always done it, and this is Little League, it's not Major League Baseball. They couldn't see what it could be. They didn't have any visionaries on there. So we went on, and after the meeting and after the board member told me what the vote was, I said to him, and this was in the fall, so the season was already over. And I said to him, "Do you guys got any money left from this year?" And he goes, "Yeah, we got some money left." I said, "Okay, let's try something." I said, "Let's pick out a few things out of this 5-year plan that are going to slap people in the face when they come out their opening day of next year. So things with color, things that are vibrant, but at the same time benefit the program." And he goes, "Yeah, that's a good idea." So we went out and we got we had chain link fences, so you had the tops of the fences, you had the prongs of the chain link fence sticking up like this, not very safe. And little league, fences at little leagues are typically 4 or 5 feet tall, so they're within range where a player could hang themselves up on it if they're not careful, things like that. So we purchased fence cap. We purchased some windscreen for the outfield fences to make them look nicer. But we also purchased things that coaches had been asking for, like mounted home plate tarps. And one of the comments I got from the groundskeeper that was there at the time when I was first involved here, who didn't have much knowledge of groundskeeping, but just enough to make him dangerous, was, the coaches will never put those on at the end of the night or anything like that. And I said, well, if you don't teach them why they need to do that and help them understand what the benefits are, yeah, they won't do it. But if you teach them that, they'll do it. And then we put wall pads on the backstops, those kind of things. So they were all very colorful, and they all had function. But it was, when you walk into that park, then the following opening day, it slapped you in the face. And the following spring, when opening day came and we had everything up, the fans, or I should say the families, just went nuts. They were going up to the board members saying, "Oh my gosh, what a great place you guys have done to fix this place up and everything." They were all excited, and they just loved what was being done. They're shaking the board members' hands. And the board members are just kind of looking over at me like, "Okay, you got us this time." And so at the next board meeting, they kind of talked it over and said, "Hey, why don't we let them try doing something else that was on that 5-year plan?" So they came up to me, and I wasn't on the board yet. They kept asking me to be on the board, and I kept saying, I can't be on your board because you purchased from the company I work for, and that would be a conflict of interest, blah, blah, blah." And I was able to hold off being a board member for a while with that excuse. I didn't want to get sentenced quite yet. So they asked me to go in and rebuild the infield of the major field. Now, the major field was our 11 and 12-year-old fields. And if you know about Little League baseball, of course, the 12-year-olds is the big deal for Little League. So this was their main field. This was their showcase field. And so we made plans that following fall and stripped that infield, the infield grass, the foul territories. It needed recrowning and regrading. We needed to improve the infield dirt. And this is at this point in time, dirt edge wasn't around yet, and engineered soils hadn't come on the radar yet. So I had to work with what we had there locally. But we went ahead and that fall and regraded it. You'll see the pictures here as we're flipping through them of the field being upgraded. And we put a warning track in between the dugouts because they just had grass up to the dugouts, and of course that all wears out and looks like crap, and then it gets muddy when it gets rainy and all that kind of stuff. So we put a warning track from dugout to dugout in the foul territories. And the following spring, opening day, again the fans are all excited, and we've got a really nice looking ball field with a nice top dressing on there, and it looked beautiful. And again, we're getting rave reviews for how great the field is. There's no more bad hops. Everything's at grade and looking perfect and all that good stuff. So, and that's where things started to take off. The board was getting all these accolades for what was going on there. They pretty much at that point turned me loose. And at the same time, this is getting almost 2 years into it, is when they roped me into being on the board that year, that October in the elections. And the first thing I did when I got onto the board was I said, "Well, can I see your budget?" And they go, "What budget?" And I go, "What do you mean you don't have a budget? You guys are bringing in $200,000 in revenue stream, right now. You mean to tell me you just kind of put it in one hand and it goes back out the other, and there's no accountability or anything? Nobody looks at an overall plan of what you're spending everything on and where the money's coming from and all that kind of stuff, because they had several revenue sources between registrations and concessions and signage and all that kind of stuff, but nothing's written down. There's no grand master sheet that's looking at this stuff, and they're like, no, we don't have anything. I said, how in the hell can you even plan your future if you don't know where your money's coming from, where's it going, and are there places where we can, take money and save it up for better projects? That was the one thing, and of course the other thing I was still arguing about was the registration costs. They were too low when you compared them to all the other sports. When my son first got on there, we were paying $95 a year, but for hockey, he was paying over $1,000 a year for that. Not that I'm saying that we had to charge anywhere near that, but bottom line was, when you compared it to a lot of the more other comparable sports, it was too low. And they said, well, Little League likes us to keep it low. Oh, that's great. Little League can say that because they got TV contracts. They got all the money they need coming in to take care of their fields. But you've got to take care of your fields and keep them safe and keep them playable. That takes money. So you need to get your registrations up. So we worked on that over time, and I'll get into that more here in a little bit. But so the old saying is, he who says something about the budget ends up getting stuck creating the budget, which is what happened with me. I ended up creating the budget, and we had, when I set the budget up, one of the things I wanted to do was, so we had a treasurer who took in the money and paid the bills and all that kind of stuff, but we needed another layer. You should always have a checks and balance when it comes to budgets, and especially in youth organizations and things like that, because they're notorious for people being a little nefarious and possibly skimming some money off. So I wanted to make sure we had some checks and balances there. So we had the treasurer, and then he would pay the bills and everything, and then I would take all the receipts, all the deposit slips, all that kind of stuff, and plug them into a tracking program to track, what parts of the budget each bill was being applied to, and we could keep track monthly of how things were moving. And that's a critical planning document for any organization. And I hope to do a show on that later this year, probably in the fall, about budgeting, because it's a crucial document when you want to try and upgrade your facility and upgrade your program. So, but the other thing that when I started working at this facility, so this facility was built in 1964, so it had been around quite a while, and this is the early 2000s. And when I came on to this organization, they were trying to take care of the grounds with two broken down Craftsman, home lawn tractors. Something that you really shouldn't be using for something like this. They aren't built for that kind of vast land to take care of. And we had to rob parts from one to get the other to work. At the time, we didn't have money to go out and buy decent groundskeeping tools and stuff. So we made do while I worked to help get our financial situation in a little better shape where we could spend money on that. So you'll see some pictures here of what was our groundskeeping shed. These were basically the old concession stands from the early 60s that had been converted to, one of them was the ground storage, and the other one was baseball and softball storage for their equipment. And we were crammed in there tight with not a lot of room. And what you see, the two tractors that you see in there in the pictures are actually tractors we had purchased after we got rid of those two old Craftsmen. And we had those tractors till a little bit later when we had more money and we were able to purchase some more professional equipment. And the first piece of professional equipment we bought was a utility vehicle, a Toro Workman that could haul a lot of soil. Those first several years, and I had a great crew working with me that I trained there. We were hauling all of our soils and warning track materials in those little dump carts that you see in the pictures of the outside of our building. Everything was being hand loaded and hand unloaded out of those little garden carts, and we were hauling. I mean, we're talking about 30, 40 tons of material between warning track material, topsoil, and infield soil over the course of a season that we were moving by hand with those little carts. I mean, that's how bare bones we were in those early years. But again, I had some great crew, and they stuck it out with me, and so we forced visual upgrades for the board to see and see what the effect was on the members. And like I talked about, we did the major field first, and once the success of the major field infield was taken care of, then we moved on and upgraded our other two fields, which was the minor field, which is that's where that was our 8, 9, and 10-year-olds played on that field. It was a much smaller diamond, still a 60-foot diamond, but it was a smaller outfield. And then we had, after that, we did the senior field, which was our 90-foot diamond. We worked on the foul territories and some of the infield on that as well. And all the fields got the upgrades, as time went on. And eventually we actually turned in Duredge into most of those to help fix those fields. So the key is that, as the membership cheered each of these upgrades, it got easier and easier to raise the registrations. And that was one of the things I had told the board from the very beginning. As long as people see you spending money to upgrade your facility, and they can see the difference, you'll never have a complaint about raising the registration fees. The board was always scared to death to raise registration fees. So they made a habit of doing it a little bit each year. So each year we'd raise it, $10, $15. I think one of the biggest years we did was probably $25. But it makes a difference each year as you're bringing that up, and that helped to get our money up where we needed to, so we could start having some of these purchases that would be some better equipment and better facilities and so on and so forth. So as long as they saw those upgrades, they never complained. And upgrades weren't just meant for the playing fields either. One of the things that I did back when I was with the Orioles, when we first moved to Oriole Park, the first year or two, I used to just get irked about some of the things that were designed into the ballpark but never taken advantage of at first. They had all these massive planting beds outside the ballpark that were, I don't remember if they planted, I think, if I recall, I don't think they planted anything in but trees, and then the rest was just all bark mulch. And then they'd bring in the prisoners 3 times a year to pull all the weeds out of the beds. And so one day I bought down from the Orioles our special assistant to the owner, and I took him around the ballpark, and I took him up to the upper deck, and we looked out over the parking lot, and I said, "Look out here, what do you see?" And he goes, "Well, I see a parking lot and blah blah blah." And I said, "Look harder." I said, "Look at those planters. What do you see?" "Well, there's a lot of trees in there and bark mulch." I said, "Exactly. It's not very inviting. It doesn't give you the pop on the wow." I said, "It doesn't," and I don't like to use this term, but it doesn't Disneyize it. If you go to Disney and you see the beautiful landscaping and everything, it's very inviting. It makes things much more happy. And so I talked with him about, let's see what we can do about getting flowers and whatnot being put in those big planting beds, and even some inside the ballpark to soften the concrete and steel of the walkways underneath the seating bowl. And so it was kind of a beautification project, and it worked really well. And I bought that same idea to the Little League. You've got to. We had, fortunately, a what I would call a park-like setting at our ballpark. So because this was built back in '64, we didn't have what you see a lot of now, which is the wagon wheel ballparks where you've got 4 or 5 fields. We had fields that were just kind of randomly set apart with a lot of big trees for shade, which is coveted by fans. And that's the thing that you see missing a lot of at these wagon wheels. It's not very comfortable on a hot summer day in July and August. So we built, when we built our new groundskeeping building, one of the things I suggested we put on there was a picnic pavilion that faced to the fields. And that became immensely popular. It gave them coverage. There was no place to run when it rained out there before. So this gave them cover for that. And at the same time, it was a nice place to picnic. They could buy their food at the concession stand. And we had a concession stand that just really knocked it out of the ballpark when it came to creating revenue. I mean, we made a lot of money off of that concession stand. And that's one of the big keys to our success. But then, as you'll see, we had a big planting bed out in front of it, and I just loaded it up with flowers. In the spring, we'd put tulips in there. We'd plant them in the fall, and then we had typically 3 change-outs of plantings there. We'd have the tulips, and then we'd put in summer annuals, and then for fall ball, we'd change out and put in fall plantings like mums and things like that. And those kind of things go a long way at just making people feel good and opening up their pockets and paying more to come and sit and watch a ball game at a place like that, because people would go here and they'd come and watch their child play their game, but they wouldn't leave. They would stay there and because their kids knew, kids on the next game's team and things like that. So it was a place for families to hang out and just really have a great time every day of the summer. So it's important that you not only just look at the ball fields, but you have to look at the whole group of people that you're entertaining. You're not just entertaining the ball players; you're entertaining the families. So we also did the same thing. We had a pretty pathetic looking run down playground. So we spent thousands and thousands of dollars to fix that up, and you'll see it's in the pictures there. It's right next to the picnic pavilion, so the parents could keep an eye on their kids and have a picnic and whatever else they wanted to do. Watch their kid play if the field that they were playing on was in visual range of that picnic pavilion. So it was important that we gained a fan's appreciation for the park as well as the ball players, and all that goes into getting people to really feel good about a place like that they're going to want to give you more money to take care of the facility. So as upgrades increased and the facility improved, pockets opened, and boom, success breeds interest. That's all there is to it. That's one of the big secrets. The other thing we did was we got away from buying cheap stuff. We bought better products for the fields. We always invested in quality, and instead of buying, good and cheap, as the old saying goes. Those two words aren't synonymous with success. And because of that, in a lot of cases, when you buy products that are quality, they last longer, they perform better. You don't find you're spending as much money to constantly replace stuff that's not of such good quality. So in the long haul, you do make out and do come out in the long run saving money in that kind of a situation. People too often are short-sighted and look at the upfront cost instead of seeing how far out that's going to carry them versus if they're using the cheaper products. The numbers during that time skyrocketed. As we were doing the improvements, our registration numbers took off. We went from about 700 kids when I first got involved for the summer program. That peaked at a little over 1,000 kids within about 5-6 years, I believe it was. And then we had a fall ball program, and that program, when I got involved, fall ball was fairly had only been on the horizon for us for a couple of years at that point. So we didn't have big numbers to begin with, but that jumped all the way up to 700 kids. I mean, it was huge, just huge. So we were basically had 1,700 kids between our two seasons that we were pulling in. And our revenue stream went from $200,000 when I first got involved up to just shy of $500,000. And, it got to a point where I turned to our board members, one of our board members at one point, I said, this is like printing money, especially for fall ball. Fall ball was a bigger money maker from a cost versus what we have to spend to put it on, or revenue versus what we had to spend to put it on. And that's what just continued to fund all the upgrades that we were doing to the facility and to the program itself. And one of the things we did, we were sensitive because a lot of people worried about kids who couldn't afford to play at our facility. Well, we took care of them. If there was a child that couldn't afford to play, their family couldn't afford to pay them, because of the money we were bringing in, we said, don't worry about it. He can come and play. We'll take care of his registration. So we did cover that as well. So we never shut anybody out because we were increasing our prices either. So basically, we were creating that experience with the picnic pavilion, with the playground, with the upgrades in the fields, how nicely we were keeping the facility. It was just a really special place. And the revenue surged, and like I said, it peaked just shy of $500,000. And the other interesting thing that occurred in all of this, as we got better and better and the place looked nicer and nicer, we started hosting some of the state tournaments for Little League, the district tournaments and the state tournament. So other teams got in to come to our facility and see what we were doing. Well, a rising tide lifts all boats, and as other organizations came and saw what we were doing, they started to do the same thing. So when we raised registration fees, they would raise registration fees, and they started pumping money into their facilities as well. And so we actually helped to really raise the bar of a lot of these ballparks here in Wisconsin. It was actually really kind of cool to see, and we did have a couple of programs where they kept raising the registrations, but they never put anything back in the facility. They got into some trouble because they were doing some not so nice things with that money. And but for the most part, the leagues improved all over the state, and the ball fields improved all over the state. So we kind of proved to people that yes, you can have nice fields, provided that your people are paying for the upkeep of those fields and the increased costs, but you have to give them something back, and so you have to make sure that you're giving them a great experience and a great facility. So, the kind of the lessons that I learned through all this in my 15 plus years that I was doing this was you have to treat these, whether it's a youth organization or an adult baseball association or softball association, whatever it is, you have to treat it like a business. You got to be budgeting. You got to be doing long-range planning. You got to price it properly if you're taking care of the facility. Now, if you're a facility where you're using a city-owned facility and they do all the maintenance and everything, but you want upgrades to that, and the city says, "Hey, sorry, we don't have the money for this. We're tapped out." I will bet you, in most cases, if you talk to the city and say, "Hey, if we come up with the money for it, will you, put up batting cages for us on this field or whatever?" In most cases, the cities will approve of that. And in a lot of cases, they'll probably even put it up for you if they can, if they've got the right people. So the organizations have the power to raise the money. Municipalities don't have that kind of power in a lot of cases. They need help from the community to help improve their ball fields to a certain degree. So keep that in mind. But anyways, like I said, run it like a business. Have good management structure, a good structure for the board. Make sure you're pricing properly for the services you're provided and things like that. The second lesson would be, choose quality over price for longevity and performance. Don't be short-sighted and just look at what the price is up front, because that'll you'll go cheap every time. I guarantee it. Always look for quality. That it's just going to get you farther. One of the big lessons that I learned while being on the board is you had to have some dreamers on the board. People who would look long range and go, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool to do this and do that?" And those are the people who are going to set up that long range plan and try and figure out how you're going to accomplish it. And then you also need to have doers. Our board was a working board. Everybody on that board had some duty that they had to perform for that league. Um, Obviously, I oversaw building and grounds the whole time I was up there on the board. But everybody has a duty, and you need those doers. You just can't, because a lot of times you'll run into guys who want to be on the board and will get on the board, and the only reason they're on the board is because they want their kid to get on the all-star team or on the tournament team or whatever the heck it is. Those kind of people we don't need. They're a dime a dozen. We need people who want to continue to work towards the general improvement of both the operation and the service that we provide to the community. So, but the dreamers are important because the dreamers are the ones who look out for the potential of the facility and say, wouldn't it be cool if we had, whatever, an archway at the opening that people could come walking through to be the grand entrance, stuff like that. You got to have those dreamers, absolutely, because they're going to push you hard to try and always make things better. And then there's the lesson of, and you've probably heard this line before, if you build it, they will come. And that's absolutely true. If you take care of your facility, if you make it immaculate, if you are constantly upgrading it and making it better and keeping it clean, keeping it well trimmed, the people will come. The secret here, folks, is that parents want to send their kids to nice facilities. And if you take care of the facility, you're going to attract those people in there. Okay? So that's the big secret. The last thing I would say is that I worked in Major League Baseball for 15 and a half years. I was involved with Little League Baseball for 15 years. And I'm going to tell you, I got more satisfaction working or volunteering my time with the Little League than I ever did working in Major League Baseball. Sounds kind of strange, but here's the deal. It was way more satisfying because the families and the kids never expected to have such great fields. I had kids who went through our program, then went on to play high school and college baseball, and they've come back to visit and yeah, I've asked them, what's the best field you ever played on? You played in college, so there's probably some college fields out there, blah blah blah, and inevitably, in most cases, they said that senior field over there, that was the best field I ever played on, which is kind of a sad comment on athletics. Athletics' attention to the sport of baseball and softball. If they're that bad up at the high school and college level, they can't bring themselves to take a little bit more pride and take care of those fields and make sure that they're safe for those players. But it was cool to see the parents come into the complex like, oh my God, look at this place, or isn't that field beautiful? And the kids, and I always used to hear parents say, oh, it's too bad the kids will never realize how nice this field is. The truth was, I had many times where kids came back from playing on a tournament team and they'd go off and play in a tournament somewhere, and they'd come back and tell me what was wrong with their fields out there. And these kids are, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids. They realized after playing on our fields over the years what was a good field and what wasn't. So it was a very satisfying thing to just be able to create something that they would never expect at that level, more so than Major League Baseball, where the players always expect it, and the fans always expect it, and the ownership always expects it. So you have to do it. So it was more of a surprise type thing. So that's my story. And why does it matter? Because I've proven that you can do it at that level. Now the question is can we help you do that? And that's what we're here for. And that's what we'll be doing in the coming months and who knows, maybe even years of doing this show. All right, we've come to the part of our another segment of our show, and I've kind of titled it North South. And what this part of the show is all about is kind of taking a look at what's going on in the north part of the country versus the south part of the country as far as what should you be looking out for or working on your fields during this particular month or this time of the year. Some parts of the year are a little more mundane than others. Certainly, changing seasons are always going to be a busier time for us. And so with me, I've got another crusty old groundskeeper, Tom Burns, longtime friend of mine and former co-Major League groundskeeper. With me, Tom, why don't you give our audience a little spiel about your background, your career.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Paul. I've been in professional baseball spent about 28 years. Started out in 1978 with the Cleveland Indians. Worked for the California Angels. Spent 20 years with the Texas Rangers, from assistant superintendent to building their spring training facility and operating that for a number of years. Took over the ballpark in Arlington in 96 and worked there as a superintendent through 2006. Worked in the calcine clay industry with Diamond Pro for a number of years, in the retail industry with Ewing Irrigation. Spent about 3 years in the construction industry, and then been with Dura Edge almost 5. So I've kind of been around all facets of this organization. So seen a lot of things, made a lot of mistakes and learned from them, and hopefully we can give some people some good help.
You're not a groundskeeper if you don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
So really you've maintained fields all over the southern portion of the country, from Arizona, from Arizona to Florida.
Yeah, Arizona, Florida, Texas. So 3 distinctly different climates. Just gave me a lot of experience. Met a lot of great people, way different than up north. And I grew up north, started my career there, and the South is a different animal.
Yeah, and I've done the transition zone, which is an area across the center part of the country, which you can grow warm season or cool season grasses, and either way it'll probably be a struggle, but you kind of find which one's going to work the best for you and you go with it. And then of course I've also worked up in the north here in the Midwest, so we have a pretty far-ranging talent here between the two of us of maintaining ball fields and maintaining turf grass in those two regions. So what I'd like to do, and we'll start in the South with Tom. If you're a groundskeeper right now here in the month of March and going into early April, what are the kinds of things that you're as a groundskeeper you're going to be dealing with? Now, obviously, they start baseball and softball out a lot earlier down in the South, so a lot of cases you're probably up and running already.
Yeah, I consider, California pretty much the South, Southern California, Arizona, Florida, you're playing all year round there. So there's really no start and stop to the season. Down in South Texas, they slow down in the wintertime. So you're either playing right now, high schools are playing right now, Parks and Rec, you've got recreational softball playing. The Little League seasons and amateur baseball kind of waits till school's over to really get in full force. So if you're playing already, I would say the biggest thing is, especially in the Southeast, we're going to get a lot of rain. We're going to get a lot of wind. We were just talking about before we came on the air about all the wind storms we've had. So really, you really have to pay attention to your infield. You got to pay attention to lip management, because we get a lot of wind that moves material off into the lips. Rain events, really got to make sure you keep a good grade on your field and you keep your lip management intact so you get drainage on your field. I see people make a lot of mistakes on trying to get on their field too early after a rain event, dumping way too much drying agent out there. Your best defense against that, like I said, good grade, good dragging protocol. Make sure you don't have low spots. Uh, and another thing is, and we've talked about this a lot, pull the bases when you drag. That's a big thing that people forget. Puddle management, remove the standing water as soon as you can after a rain event. The best way to keep puddles from forming in the first place, having a good grade, doing your maintenance around the bases, the player positions. Really pay attention to that. When you do have puddles, use drying agents sparingly. Any of the calcine clay materials will work. You don't have to use the real fine graded material. You can use your bigger gradations for that. It's the same material. It'll do the same thing. But those are the big things. And then mount and plate maintenance. It's so much different than the professional game. Parks and Rec and high school amateur ball. You play all these tournaments where you may have 6 games a day. Obviously, you don't have the manpower to go out there and repair that mound after every game. So maybe you're doing it once a day. If you can take your fields and give them 1 day of rest a week, even on a rotational basis, if you've got multiple fields, and work on that field, get your mound, get your plate back together, baselines, lip management, all those little things. A little bit of maintenance on a periodic schedule will help keep a big problem from developing.
And what about in the grass sense of the word for people down in South End? Obviously, you're not at the transition time. If anybody did overseed, I mean, I'm sure in most cases the parks and high schools, for the most part, don't overseed their ball fields in the winter. Correct?
Yeah. There's a few that do. There's some that don't. Some of them have gone to just playing on dormant grass the whole time. It's kind of tough because you're going to get bare spots where the position players are in the outfield. At that level, you really don't know the pitchers. You don't know the tendency of the hitter. Everybody plays straight up. Especially in softball, you have the 4 wear spots.
Yeah.
What you can do is go out there and we start getting a little bit warmer, do some aerification, excuse me, do a little top dressing in those areas. It's going to come back. The Bermuda is going to take off. Overseeded areas, when you can get a break at the end, generally in this area, it's the end of May, beginning of June, is a really, really critical time. That's when your Bermuda starts coming up. So what I used to do is do everything that I can to promote Bermuda grass growth. Don't worry about the ryegrass. If the ryegrass wants to hang around a little while, let it do it. As people get just really too worked up, it's the end of May, I got to get this ryegrass out here. Don't worry about it. Promote the Bermuda. The rye will take care of itself.
Yeah. Well, up in the north here, we've got a little different world. Obviously, we're trying to get ourselves out of winter. We just had another big winter storm go through to the west of me just the past couple of days, and got another one coming here in another couple of days. So, for instance, in the north central part of the country and up in the northeast, you still got situations with snow cover, or if you don't have snow cover, you may still have frost. I mean, there are areas that we can look at if we can pull up the frost depth map. This is a map that's put out by the National Weather Service and is updated constantly. And you can see here, and the strange thing is they only have it for the north central part of the country, so that's kind of strange. But anyhow, you can see on some of these, especially up in the Dakotas, northern Minnesota, they'll still 40, 50 inches of frost. Now, it was a pretty exceptionally cold year this year up in that region, so it got probably deeper than we've seen more recently. But with recent warm weather, we're also seeing a lot of thawing out of the upper portion of that. I know if you look at Wisconsin on that map, you'll see that some of the southern part of that state, where I am, it shows that we still have frost in the ground, some places down as low as 28 inches or so. But in a lot of cases, you've got the top foot and a half that is all thawed out and ready to go. Now the problem is that frost inhibits water from going down and continue to percolate through the soil, so it can slow you down from getting onto a field. You might come in the morning and it's maybe 30, 32 degrees, and the field looks dry, but in all reality, it's just frozen. And by noontime, it's a murky mess. So we're waiting on frost to come out of the ground. In a lot of cases up here in the extreme north. Over the rest of the Midwest, they're in the process of moving along and starting to play ball when you get down to the transition zone. Over to the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic and those areas, colleges are certainly playing. The key for these areas in the north where the frost is, once the frost is out of the ground and the infield is dry enough, then you need to get out there and roll, because Mother Nature does a great job of aerifying that dirt. The expansion of the soil when it freezes and then thaws again opens up a lot of pore space. So when it does rain, you get a sloppy mess because the water just fills up that pore space. So you want to tighten up that skinned area as quickly as possible once the frost is out of the ground and the infield is dry enough that you can get a roller out there, or if you don't have a roller, just tire roll it with your utility vehicles and get that packed up tight. The other thing that you're going to look forward to here at this time of the year is from the grass end is getting down your pre-emergent for crabgrass and the other weedy grasses that we treat for. And here's another website from Michigan State University, which is super handy for those of you who've got to worry about this kind of an application. And it's their growing degree days tracker. And they have a situation here where you can check off the crabgrass pre-emergent application. And so you put in the zip code that you're in, and it'll plot. That's what's up there now. You see my area plotted here. And then if you go down below on the bottom of the chart there, the bar chart shows what the current temperatures have been, and they even give you about a 5-day forecast there on the far right side of how they predict the temperatures are going to go. Once you get into the green area, that's the time that you want to put down your pre-emergent for your crabgrass. And they have this for the whole United States. You can maneuver the map around and you'll see what they're showing you there. The areas in orange or reddish color, whatever you want to call that, are areas where it's beyond.
Yeah, you've already missed your window down
You've missed it. Yeah, and if you watch it as time goes on, that map charges upward. A week ago, if you looked at this map a week ago, that green was nowhere near us. But we had 70-degree weather this past week, and that really jumped things up tremendously. It was amazing the jump that I saw in a week on this.
Paul, if you had looked at this 2 weeks ago, you would probably just be getting into the green. I've seen crabgrass start coming up. The POA's coming up really strong.
Yeah, they both come up about the same temperature.
Yeah,
and you've got to hit it when you can. And timing is everything when it comes to applying these pre-emergents. So you'll want to get it down at the right time. This is a great website, and I believe we'll have a way for you to grab onto this when you're after you get off the podcast here, that you'll have a link to go to. So just a great tool for you to use. So that's what we've got for the north side here. We're going to be playing ball up here pretty darn soon, certainly within the next couple of weeks. We've got a cold shot coming in here the next couple of weeks, but after that, I think things will finally settle down around the northern part of the country, and people will get ready to play. And in the majors, you're going to play whether you like it or not.
Yeah,
exactly. If it's 30 degrees. But, unfortunately, youth baseball has to deal with the same thing, and it's no fun swinging a bat when it's 32 degrees. That's for darn sure.
Yeah. I think another thing, Paul, that I was thinking of, if people, you talked about packing the infield down. If people get a forecast of some heavy rain for a while after their field's been dry, if they will wet their field down and roll it really tight, it will help. It sounds counterintuitive. Why do I want to wet my field before the rain? If you can get it wet down and packed really tight, it's going to help that excess water to sheet off. That's the only way you can
Correct.
drain a skinned infield. Get excess water to sheet off. So that brings the lip management in and your grade of your field, the evenness. You don't want any high and low spots in there because all they do, they're bird baths, they hold water. So if you can do that, that may help you out in getting on your field quicker after a rain event.
Yeah. I want to leave with a story that Tom has that he doesn't realize he's going to tell. But I want you to tell the story about tire rolling and your old boss from, I think it was Cleveland.
Oh yeah,
Didn't he get the?
Well, when I was out in Arizona, we had built the fields for the Angels for spring training, and we screened those by hand 4 inches deep. And so we were left with, really fluffy 4-inch soil. And it was really difficult to pack it down. So I called up Harold Bossard. So he just told me, he goes, well, do you got an old pickup truck with bald tires? He goes, just take it and roll it with the bald tires. Get anything you can with wheels on it. And, so just because you don't have a roller doesn't mean that you can't roll your field. You can use your lawnmower, you can use a utility vehicle, use a golf cart, whatever you have. And I think that's a big thing that people miss nowadays is there's so much specialized equipment that we've kind of lost sight of just using
being able to make do.
Use your ingenuity, make a tool. That's how all these tools developed. Is somebody, got in their shop and, I can't afford this. I'm just going to make it. So really, I think one thing that's really important that I learned a long time ago, with giving seminars with Paul and just being all across the country, and I noticed it, we're always harder on ourselves than anybody else can be on our field. I think that's what makes us successful. But one thing people focus on all the time is I can't do this because of this. I can't aerify my field. I can't do that. Well, just because you bring your aerifier out doesn't mean you have to do the whole field. I don't know any rule on that. But the one thing people always focus on, what they can't do. Don't worry about what you can't do. What you worry about is what you can do. And I think you'll be a lot more successful that way. And a lot less stress.
The story I was thinking of was the brand new Cadillac that. That's the story. That's the story I wanted you to tell.
Yeah,
real quickly, and then we'll leave it there.
Yeah, well, and it's been so long ago that I don't remember all the absolutes about this, but yeah, we didn't have a roller or something, so he brings out a brand new Cadillac to roll the field with. I mean,
that was in Cleveland, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe it was. And I mean, I've seen. It was like Caddyshack.
Best looking roller you could ever find.
Oh, yeah.
And probably heavy as hell.
And, the only problem was it was brand new and his tires weren't bald yet.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he drove it till the tires, just fell off. But yeah, that's just it's a perfect example. Get something out there, roll it. There's so many things you can do. Again, don't focus on what you can't do.
All right, Tom, thank you very much for this edition of North-South, and we'll be back next time.
Okay, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. All right, let's go to our Around the Horn segment, which is where we dig up a maintenance tip for you folks. Each month we'll have a new maintenance tip for you, God willing, and we'll give you something great to think about and to hopefully apply to your ball fields. So this particular month, we're going to be looking at whether to clay or not to clay your mound and home plate areas. And if so, what do we use? So I've got some nice little graphics here for you to help kind of explain where we're at and how to figure it out. This first slide here deals with your ability to have access to water on the ball field. That's the top line there. So where you see the little hash mark through the hose means you don't have water access on the field. And as you slide to the right, there's a better chance that you have water access or you have full water access and are able to put water on your high wear areas, meaning the mound and home plate areas, in the batter's boxes, the catcher's box, the pitcher's mound. Those key areas where all of the wear occurs from a game. Below that, as we look at our lineup of products that we have at DurEdge to fortify your high wear areas, we go from a product called DurEdge HydroPro, which is a hydrated professional infield soil, ready to use right out of the bag. And then we go into our premium mound clays, the DuraPitch Premium in that greenish bag, the DuraPitch Professional, and then the Black Stick. And basically, those are in order there according to their clay content, as you see in that next arrow down below. To the left is less clay content, and to the right is the highest clay content product. Um, and everything here is in relation to one another. So if you don't have good water access, or if you have no water access, you're not going to consider some of those clays on the right hand side, the premium. I'm sorry, not the premium, the professional and the black stick. It's the ones on the left that would be uh, more typical of what you might use in a situation where you may not have any water or you have limited access to water. The bottom line, that black line where you see that little itty bitty groundskeeper down there on the left, and then the big guy to the right, obviously dictates the amount of maintenance it's going to get. If it gets very little or no maintenance, and I should have a little hash mark in that where that little guy is standing there. If there's little or no maintenance being regularly applied to the field, you're going to stick with those clays on the left hand side. If you have, like you get up into the collegiate and professional uh, situations where you have crews, or I mean, even you're even going to have good dedicated crews at some private complexes. Uh, Even the little league complex that I worked with, we had a 3-man crew out there that was well trained. They could go to those higher end clays because they require more work on them on a periodic nature. So the clays on the right hand side got to have water access, and it's going to require more maintenance, more regular maintenance to maintain those properly so that they'll perform correctly for you. So those are some things to consider when you're picking your clays for these high areas. Another thing to take a look at is the type of cleats that are being used on those fields. Um, and I've got a nice graphic here that shows that there's basically three types of cleats that you see in the world today. In baseball and softball, they're going to be the metal cleats, molded rubber or plastic cleats, and then you have your turf shoes. And turf shoes really don't come into play unless it's a hybrid artificial turf field, which we'll talk about here in a minute. When it comes to metal cleats, those are typically going to be used for players 13 years and older. On fields where those metal cleats are used, you can fortify those mounts with our higher clay content mound clays. So our DuraPitch Premium, Professional, or our Black Stick uh, have higher and higher clay amounts as you move from the first one I mentioned to the last one. And the higher the clay content with these metal cleats, the better the performance and the less wear that you're going to see on those ball fields. For softball fields, we do suggest using our DuraPitch Premium or our DuraPitch Professional. I would stay away from the black stick for softball. Softball doesn't like to have a really hard, firm surface. That's more typical of baseball players more so than softball players. And typically, if they want something high performing, they'll go with the DuraPitch Professional. Still a high clay content material, but not quite as dense and firm as the black stick can get. Now, molded cleats are interesting. So, in the youth sports, youth baseball and youth softball, 12 years and below, you can only wear plastic or rubber cleats for obvious reasons. You don't want the kids getting their legs or their ankles and whatnot torn up by. The problem with that and at the youth level is that those cleats are very blunt ended. So they're like as kids run around, they're like a bunch of little tamps compressing the clay around the plate area and the mound area. And I experienced this myself while helping to maintain that Little League complex that we talked about earlier in the show today, um, especially on the mound, but even at home plate, where they would actually we were using the Duredge Premium mound clay on our 11, 12-year-old field. And they would get that mound packed so tightly that about every 3 weeks we'd have to go out there with an axe and just kind of hack up the landing area on the mound to give it some, allow it to be a little more malleable again. So when they landed, you know, they actually stopped because the problem was it would get so firm and so hard they would actually slip on that. So you want to be careful with that with the youth sports, with the youth levels, and go with you can go with the Durapitch Premium, but I would suggest possibly going more with our Duredge Hydro Pro, which is our professional infield soil that is prehydrated. It's got plenty of clay in it to reduce the amount of dig out on those areas, especially at the youth level. That it should work out fine for you. Again, you can use premium. Just be careful and keep an eye on things and make sure it's not getting so firm that they're not slipping on it. The molded cleats are used at all levels, not just at the youth level. So if they use them up above 13 years old, typically you'll get a good mix of players that are using both the molded cleats or the metal cleats, and so the metal cleats will come in there and hack it up enough that it's plenty safe, and the players with the molded cleats can still get a grab. So uh, that's the situation with molded cleats. Turf cleats, you're not going to see too much situations there where you're going to run into a hybrid field. Once in a while, you'll run into them. The hybrid turf fields have artificial turf for the grass areas, but they might put in a mound and a home plate and maybe an infield skin that is dirt. Uh, Theoretically, you're only supposed to use turf cleats on those types of fields, or they void the warranty if they allow kids to play out there with metal cleats, or possibly even the rubber cleats as well. Um, so if they're just using the turf cleats, they're not going to get a lot of wear in those areas because they just don't have the nubs to really dig in there really good. So you could probably get away with our Duredge Hydro Pro again, or certainly the Durapitch Premium if you needed to for fortifying those areas. So that's the big difference with the cleats and what you might have to think about from a clay content or the use of our clays in those situations. So wrapping it up, if we look at our lineup of uh, mound clays that we have, um, again, if we go from left to right, we're going to go from the least amount of clay content in the product to the one on the right has the most clay content. So the HydroPro multi-purpose clay, it's the most economical from a price standpoint. You really get a lot of bang for your buck with this product. It's for use on infrequent or no maintenance ball fields or ball fields that have no access to water or both, obviously. There's no tarping required in this particular product. You can put it into your batters boxes and mounds, and in a lot of park situations, even high school situations, these sit open. And if it rains on them, okay, it's going to happen. You'll be able to get those mounds back in shape fairly easily. But more importantly, because of the lower clay content, they're not going to be as sticky or as slimy when they get wet. I mean, they'll get tacky certainly, but nothing like they would if they were the higher clay contents of the other products. So no tarping is necessary on that particular product, and it's a great option for youth baseball for 12 and under. I highly recommend it. But like I said, it is the most economical. It's considerably lower price than our other three mound clays. Durapitch Premium Clay, good for use at all levels of play and maintenance, and we see it used everywhere from the professional end all the way down to the youth end. It's what I used on like I said, our 11, 12-year-old fields uh, for the mounds. Uh, you do you access to water is preferred. You don't have to, but certainly it helps on the performance of that clay, but it's certainly not required. Tarping again preferred, just like turf. It's preferred that you could tarp and that you could add moisture. If you can't, that's fine. It is optional for those products. There's enough. There's just enough clay content to keep that bound together. But if you leave it open, it's not going to get too wickedly slimy or nasty. But again, it is higher clay content than the HydroPro, so might need a little bit more drying time. And it still is a good option for the use on youth ball fields for 12 and under. Our DuraPitch Professional Clay, used for the higher levels of maintenance and play. Uh, Access to water and tarping is absolutely required to manage the moisture content in these clays in order to get them to perform the way you want them to. And this particular product is the best option for higher level softball play. Softball does not like using black stick. It tends to get too firm for them, and softball doesn't like as firm a surface as baseball does. So they do like the DuraPitch Professional. Of course, softball can also use the DuraPitch Premium. Either one of those, but from a firmer surface, it's the Professional's about the max level you can reach. Black stick gumbo clay, that's used for the higher levels as well when it comes to maintenance and water access and tarping are required to manage the moisture content in that product as well as our DuraPitch Professional. And it's the best option for baseball, basically from 13 on up. 13 years old in baseball, you can start wearing metal cleats. So anywhere from there on up, you're going to see metal cleats typically being worn by players. And black stick's going to be your best defense as far as trying to prevent the wear in those high wear areas of the batter's boxes, the catcher's box, the front slope, and the table of the mound. So hopefully that clears up a little bit of how you should pick your product and which products perform best. And hopefully this has given you a great maintenance tip for today. That's a wrap for this episode of The Inside Edge, brought to you by DuraEdge. Whether you're maintaining a local recreational ball field or something bigger, we're here to help you on your journey to create safer, easier to maintain, and more playable ball fields. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, leave a comment or email us at insideedge@duraedge.com. Be sure to follow @DuraEdge Products on social media for more tips and insights. We'll see you on the next episode.